Hello and welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring today's most pressing global issues into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. South Korea, the U.S., and Japan held combined air drills involving at least one B-1B bomber south of the Korean Peninsula on Sunday in response to North Korea's new intercontinental ballistic missile launch last week. The trilateral drills took place over waters east of South Korea's southern island of Jeju amid heightened tensions after Pyongyang fired the new Hwasong-19 ICBM into the East Sea on Thursday. North Korea said the missile's success shows the regime's absolute and irreversible position in nuclear capabilities, referring to the latest missile as the final and ultimate version of its ICBMs. So how far have the regime's missile capabilities developed, and how can the international community deal with North Korea's continued missile threats? For answers to this, we're joined by our go-to North Korea expert, Kim Mok-yeon, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for National Security Strategy. Welcome again, Dr. Go.
Thanks for having me.
And also joining us from Washington, D.C. is Ambassador Joseph Detrani, former special envoy of the U.S. for six-party talks. Great to have you with us.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, too. Now, first, let's begin with Dr. Go. Like I said, the latest joint exercise between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo aims to send a strong warning to North Korea. How effective do you believe this approach will be?
No, this essentially serves as a very strong deterrence message against North Korea. So we have to understand that there's a purpose and behind conducting such an aerial strike exercise among the United States, South Korea, and Japan in this case. We know that for the most vulnerable moment in North Korea's potential ICBM attack is when North Korea brings out the ICBM missile out of a bunker or like a storage unit and then deploys the missile. It's believed that it's going to take between 20 to 30 minutes. But then, if the Allied forces can somehow can detect these kind of preparations beforehand, that it means that it can deploy fast attack jets, or in this case, a B-1B strategic bomber to target these ICBMs before they are launched towards the United States, South Korea, or Japan. So here we have to take into consideration the fact that the B-1B strategic bomber that was used for the exercise is a very fast type of a strategic bomber. So essentially reduce the amount of time that it takes for the Allied forces to detect the warning signs on the potential North Korean attack and to counter those preparations. So there's the deterrence message clearly against North Korea, but there's also reassurance message towards the allies of the United States, in this case, South Korea and Japan. So by responding so quickly to a provocation by North Korea that involves a brand new ICBM called the Hwasong-19, which happens to be the largest and possibly the longest ranged intercontinental ballistic missile that North Korea has so far. It shows to Seoul and Tokyo, as well as the people in these two countries, that the United States remains committed to defending South Korea and Japan.
Right. Now, Dr. Go, we mentioned about the B-1B strategic bomber. What are the key features of this, and how would the latest exercise differ from previous joint training operations?
So the United States Air Force maintains three different types of strategic bombers. So there's a B-52, which is quite an ancient type of bomber, was designed back in the 1950s, but nonetheless, it's capable of carrying enormous amount of bombs, essentially payload. So therefore, it's still active in the front lines. The second type is B-2 bomber, which is the latest of the strategic bombers deployed by the United States Air Force. This is a stealth bomber, so essentially it's very hard to detect with radar these kind of bombers. So then the final one is the B-1B bomber, which is in terms of age is between B-52 and B-2. But nonetheless, what's really salient about this bomber is the speed. As I mentioned before, the reason why this bomber is so important in the overall defense plan for South Korea and Japan is that it only takes 2 hours for the B-1B bomber to reach the Korean theater of operations from the base, each base in Guam in South Pacific. So 2 hours before beginning with from the moment that it detects the potential risk signs, warning signs of attack by North Korea and reaching the actual trilateral operations in North Korea. So this really shows the amount of reaction time and was such acts as a very strong deterrent against North Korea. So in that sense, it's a very effective deterrent against North Korean WMD weapon systems.
Right, so using this weapon is the most unique portion of among these joint exercises that we had in the past, right?
Exactly.
Now, on October 31st, North Korea launched the ICBM known as the Hwasong-19, like our Dr. Go just mentioned, and it said it's the final and ultimate version. Ambassador Dutrani, what does this term signify?
Well, as Dr. Go indicated, the Hwasong-19 is quite an ICBM. It's to reach over 7,000 kilometers. The payload they could carry is very significant. So they could MIRV it, if you will, put multiple warheads on this missile. It's both conventional and nuclear. So it's a very major development. I don't think any of us disagree on that point. And that, I think from North Korea's vantage point, they're saying very clearly to the United States, but also the Republic of Korea and Japan, but indeed to the United States, we could reach you. We could reach any part of the United States with our intercontinental ballistic missile. And that missile, we spoke of, Professor Go indicated a deterrent. That's a very powerful message to the United States and to our allies that North Korea is within striking distance. So if anything untoward, if they even perceive, mind you, perceive an attack on their leadership or their command and control, they're capable of reaching out as far as the United States. So I think Kim Jong and others have made it very clear. This is a very major development on the part of North Korea.
Right. So this new ICBM, the highly developed ICBM, seems very advanced. Ambassador Dutrani, is there a chance for this ICBM to be made with the support of Russian technology?
No, I think it's an excellent question. We know the Soviet Union was very instrumental in helping North Korea with their missile programs in the 70s, but indeed in the 80s. And that was before the collapse in 1991 of the Soviet Union. So they were very instrumental. And I think now the likelihood that, given that North Korea, as you indicated a minute ago, has basically committed to Russia's war in Ukraine by sending 8,000 to 10,000 troops there, and they may be in combat as we speak. I think that Kim Jong-un is looking for something in return. And that something in return is not only money, because he'll be getting money for the deployment of these troops. There's no question about that. But he's also looking for assistance with its satellites and with its, if you will, ballistic missile capability. So yes, I do believe the Hwasong-19 could have and likely had Russian assistance.
Right, and they could be looking for more assistance from Russia with the deployment of troops.
No question about it.
Right. Now, amid this situation, North Korea has introduced a new organization called DPRK Institute of Enemy State Studies, which sharply criticized President Yoon Suk-yeol government. Now, the move comes as North Korean leader Kim Jong-un defined inter-Korean relations as those between two states hostile to each other at a party meeting, year-end party meeting. Dr. Go, why is this new organization? What is this new organization, and why was it suddenly established?
Well, it's not really. I mean, the experts in South Korea, we are speculating that this is not a new institution established by North Korea to study South Korea as an enemy state. In fact, it was named as originally as a National Unification Studies Institute, very similar to Korea Institute of National Unification that we have here. Essentially, this was probably meant to study matters of unification by North Korea for a very long time. But then, as we know, North Korea has changed its message about unification since last year. Kim Jong-un came out very strongly criticizing South Korea and started to brand South Korea as an enemy state of North Korea. And they essentially tried to match their words with deeds by amending the constitution, and also as they carried out actions along the DMZ that separates the two Koreas. For instance, destroying the transportation connections that are not operational, obviously, but they're still connected physically, the two Koreas. So the latest move by North Korea clearly is an extension of this move by the regime to send this consistent message that South Korea is now an enemy state of North Korea. So there's a little bit of a theatricality behind the move of renaming was known as the National Unification Institute, as Institute of Studies of Enemy State. But then I think that's the point. I think North Korea is essentially trying to send a message rather than change the substance of whatever they used to study in that particular organization. North Korea always had plans for forceful unification of two Koreas, and I'm sure the previous the institution, same institution, but under the previous name of National Unification Institute, probably studied the different plans to unify the two Koreas by force under the leadership of North Korea. They are doing exactly the same thing, but then renaming it to connote a stronger message, more aggressive message to South Korea, which is consistent right now with the message that North Korean regime is sending to the South. So overall, I think it's more of a posturing on the part of North Korea. So I think there's not much of I would say, a substantial difference from what it used to be doing. But nonetheless, you have to take into consideration why North Korea is keep doing and carrying out these kind of actions.
Right. So just a highlight of what they have been saying in the past.
Exactly.
Right. Now, lately, Kim Mok-yeon, deputy director of the Workers' Party, asserted that there would be no change in North Korea's nuclear power strategy, arguing that sanctions and pressure have only strengthened the country. Ambassador, what do you think is the intention behind North Korea's provocations and such kind of tough rhetoric?
Well, I think, as Dr. Go indicated, they're making it very clear that the Republic of Korea and the United States are their principal enemies, and that North Korea will not give up its nuclear weapons. Indeed, North Korea will continue to build their nuclear weapons arsenal and their ballistic missiles to deliver these, if you will, nuclear warheads. So I think Kim Yo-jong is saying very clearly what Kim Jong-un has said also, that North Korea will never dismantle its nuclear arsenal, and they will actually exponentially increase their capabilities, their nuclear capabilities, and abilities to use ballistic missiles to deliver these nuclear warheads. It's a very powerful message, but it's consistent with Kim Jong-un, and I don't think there's any ambiguity in their message and indeed what they're doing. I think that's the key. They can say a lot of things, and the rhetoric has always been very hostile. It's basically in your face what they've been saying over the years, but they're actually doing it, and they're with the Hwasong-19 launch. And what we saw in 2017 with the Hwasong-18 and 17, they're saying, look what we're doing. And what we don't see a lot of, because North Korea continues to be opaque, we don't know what's actually going on in regards to their leadership and the advice they're getting from the senior advisors to Kim Jong-un and to Kim Yo-jong. What we don't see those pieces, but what we do see is their missile launches, but what they're doing also with building a significant arsenal, if you will, of nuclear warheads. And that's not only using highly enriched uranium, but it's also using the plutonium from the Yongbyon facility. We don't see that clearly, but obviously, and I say obviously because it's consistent with what they've been saying over the years. They're building a very strong nuclear warhead capability, and that number could be between 60 and 100 nuclear warheads, and they will continue to increase that number.
Right, they were very clear. They're going to continue to develop that regardless of sanctions and whatever pressure coming from the international community. Now, speaking of this, Dr. Go, South Korea's foreign ministry is set to place new sanctions on 4 organizations and 11 individuals on North Korea, probably tomorrow or so. But as Kim Yo-jung mentioned, do you really think international sanctions or pressure have not much impact on North Korea?
Well, it depends on which aspect or size of North Korea we are talking about here. So the economic sanctions against North Korea clearly was designed to impact on the economy of North Korea. We know that has made a huge impact on the North Korean economy. We know that the North Korean exports are pretty much non-existent right now. The only major item export that's not banned from export for North Korea right now is human hair, and actually processing human hair into wigs. So it's very difficult for North Korea these days to make money. But again, this was before Russia started probably paying North Korea in exchange of munitions and missiles that North Korea started to supply en masse since last year. But nonetheless, clearly North Korean economic prospects is very constrained by the ongoing sanctions regime. And so while that's true, as Ambassador Litrani has pointed out, that hasn't dissuaded North Korean regime from putting all its eggs in one basket, in this case a nuclear basket, to accelerate the pace of its nuclear development. We know that North Korea is on track to possess not just dozens, but probably hundreds of nuclear warheads by the end of the decade. So depending on which side you are looking at the impact of sanctions, one could potentially argue that the sanctions have no impact on the North Korea's willingness to become a nuclear state. But then I think that we are essentially missing an important point here, which is what North Korea intends to do with its nuclear arsenal is not to start a war against the United States. This is a war that's hopeless. Obviously, North Korea is known to win such a nuclear exchange. But what it means, what it intends to do essentially is to somehow pressure the United States through these provocations, through the raising of tensions, to acknowledge North Korea as a nuclear state. So here, this is where sanctions, as they currently stand, come as a useful device, essentially a useful leverage on the part of the international community to essentially ask or demand North Korea to perhaps dismantle a part or maybe the entirety of the nuclear arsenal in exchange for lifting sanctions. So in that sense, we shouldn't unilaterally relax or remove sanctions against North Korea that are in place right now. We should wait until North Korea essentially comes back to the negotiation table and is willing to talk to the international community about its denuclearization.
Right, so you mean North Korea ultimately wants to get acknowledgement that they are a nuclear state. Ambassador Litrani, there are reports that preparations at North Korea's nuclear test site are complete. What is the likelihood and potential timing of a 7th nuclear test from North Korea?
So let me go back to what Dr. Go just mentioned on sanctions. That was the reason for the failure of the Hanoi summit, if you will, and between Kim Jong-un, Chairman Kim Jong-un, and President Donald Trump in February of 2019. North Korea wanted us, the United States, to lift those sanctions subsequent to 2016. So sanctions were biting and are biting, as Dr. Go indicated, very significant. So sanctions, and in addition to that, as Dr. Go indicated again, North Korea has always wanted the U.S. to accept them as a nuclear weapon state, and we've said no, complete, verifiable denuclearization. So that's the key. So to your question on Punggye, the 7th nuclear test has been imminent over the last few years. A lot will depend now on the election in the United States. Will they have a 7th nuclear test? My view is China has been very helpful in regards to telling North Korea, you don't want a seventh nuclear test. It's not in anyone's interest to have it. I think that could change depending on what happens in the next few months, where North Korea, and certainly, as you indicated in your question, they're prepared to have a seventh nuclear test, and the Punggye site is ready for that. So I think we should say a seventh nuclear test, again, depending on the elections and the pace in which we interact with North Korea, a seventh nuclear test would be imminent.
All right. Thank you for pointing that out and clarifying the situation for us. I'm afraid we will have to wrap up our discussion at this point. Many thanks to Dr. Go and Ambassador Detrani for your insights and for your expertise. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you again for joining us in Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.